Can't seem to shake off the stress of the day. Are the Demogorgon's claws of anxiety keeping you up at night? This soothing narration of Stranger Things Season 1 will lull you into a peaceful slumber, sending those nightmares into the upside down. Experience the magic of Hawkins, Indiana, in a whole new way. This calming and captivating narration of Stranger Things Season 1 will guide you into a peaceful sleep, leaving you refreshed and ready to face the day. Get ready for a unique journey through the mysteries of Stranger Things Season. This captivating narration will not only tell you the story, but also help you drift off into a peaceful slumber. Prepare to be lulled into a world of wonder and adventure. In the gentle embrace of autumn 1983, nestled in the heart of Indiana, lies a town called Hawkins. Picture it now. A place where maple trees line quiet streets, their leaves painted in warm amber and deep crimson. The air carries the scent of wood smoke, and the distant sound of children's laughter, echoing through neighborhoods where every house tells a story. Hawkins is the kind of town where everyone knows everyone, where the local diner serves coffee that's always hot, and pie that's always fresh. Main Street stretches like a welcoming smile, dotted with family-owned shops and the old movie theater that still shows double features on Friday nights. The high school stands proud and brick red against the Indiana sky, its hallways filled with the gentle chaos of teenage dreams and whispered secrets. But beneath this picture-perfect surface, something stirs in the shadows. At the edge of town, beyond the comfortable glow of streetlights, stands the Hawkins National Laboratory, a fortress of concrete and steel, surrounded by chain-link fences and warning signs. Most residents drive past without a second thought, accepting the official story of energy research and government science. Yet sometimes in the quiet hours before dawn, strange lights dance behind those windows, and the air itself seems to hum with otherworldly purpose. On a particularly peaceful November evening, 4 friends gather around a table in the basement of the Wheeler house. Mike, Lucas, Dustin, and Will, boys on the cusp of growing up, still young enough to believe in magic, and old enough to understand that the world holds mysteries. Their voices rise and fall in animated discussion over their game, dice clicking against the wooden table like gentle rain. Will Byers, the quietest of the 4, sits with his characteristic gentle smile. He's the artist of the group, always sketching in the margins of his notebooks, seeing beauty in shadows and light where others see only ordinary things. Tonight, as the game winds down and friends prepare to part ways, Will pedals his bicycle through the sleeping streets of Hawkins, his headlight cutting a narrow path through the darkness. The ride home should be simple, a familiar route through neighborhoods where porch lights create pools of safety. But tonight, something follows Will through the darkness. Not quite seen, not quite heard, but felt in the way that prey feels the presence of a predator. The streetlights flicker as he passes, and the very air seems to thicken with anticipation. When morning comes, Will's bed remains empty, his bicycle found abandoned on the roadside. His mother, Joyce, awakens to a silence that fills their modest home. Not the peaceful quiet of sleep, but the hollow absence of her youngest son. The realization hits her like cold water. Will is gone. Joyce Byers is not what some might call a typical mother. She works long hours at the general store, smokes too many cigarettes, and sometimes lets the bills pile up on the kitchen counter. But her love for her sons burns with the intensity of a flame that cannot be extinguished. When Will disappears, that love transforms into something fierce and unwavering. The police chief, Jim Hopper, arrives at her door with the careful manner of someone who has delivered bad news before. Hopper himself carries shadows. The loss of his own daughter haunts his eyes, and he approaches each case with the weight of personal understanding. He listens to Joyce's concerns with the patience of someone who knows that sometimes the impossible must be considered. As Joyce searches Will's room, touching his drawings and small treasures, she begins to notice strange things. The lights in the house flicker with no apparent cause. The telephone rings with calls that seem to come from nowhere, filled with static and something that might be her son's voice calling from an impossible distance. Other mothers might question their sanity, but Joyce trusts her instincts with the certainty of a woman who has learned to survive on intuition alone. Meanwhile, in the sterile corridors of Hawkins' lab, a girl known only as 11 moves through her daily routines like a ghost made flesh. Her head is shaved bare, her clothing consists of simple hospital gowns, and her eyes hold depths that speak of experiences no child should endure. She possesses abilities that blur the line between science and magic, the power to move objects with her mind, to peer into distant places, to touch the fabric of reality itself. Martin Brenner, the man she calls Papa, guides her through experiments that probe the limits of her extraordinary gifts. He speaks to her with false kindness, his words honey-sweet but his intentions as cold as winter steel. 11 has known no other life than this, a world of white walls, controlled environments, and tests that push her abilities to their breaking point. But tonight, something goes wrong. During an experiment that forces her to make contact with a creature from beyond our world, 11 accidentally tears open a doorway between dimensions. In that moment of terror and confusion, she escapes into the night, barefoot and afraid, carrying nothing but a hospital gown and the crushing weight of what she has unleashed upon the innocent town of Hawkins. Mike Wheeler discovers 11 hiding in the gymnasium of his middle school, soaked by rain and shivering from more than just cold. He sees past her strange appearance to the frightened child beneath, offering her food, shelter, and something she has rarely experienced: genuine kindness without expectation of return. Mike's friends Lucas and Dustin react with typical adolescent skepticism mixed with fascination. Lucas, ever practical, worries about the consequences of harboring a strange girl in Mike's basement. Dustin, naturally curious, bombards 11 with questions she cannot or will not answer. But when she demonstrates her telekinetic abilities by making Mike's model airplane soar through the air without touch, their skepticism transforms into wonder. They call her Elle, and slowly she begins to trust these boys who treat her not as a test subject or a weapon, but as a friend. Through patient questions and gentle encouragement, they learn fragments of her story, the laboratory, the experiments, and most importantly, her connection to Will's disappearance. Nancy Wheeler, Mike's older sister, navigates her own challenges as she balances the social pressures of high school, with a growing awareness that something sinister lurks beneath Hawkins's peaceful surface. Her best friend Barb Holland disappears during a party at the popular Steve Harrington's house, vanishing as suddenly and completely as Will Byers. Unlike Will's disappearance, which mobilizes the entire town, Barb's absence goes largely unnoticed by adults, who assume she simply went home early. But Nancy knows her friend too well to accept easy explanations. Barb was loyal, cautious, and would never simply abandon Nancy at a party. The guilt of that night weighs heavily on Nancy's shoulders, the knowledge that her choices led to her friend's danger. Nancy's search for answers draws her into an unlikely partnership with Jonathan Byers, Will's older brother. Jonathan, who has always existed on the periphery of high school social circles, possesses his mother's intuition and his brother's artistic eye. Together, they begin to piece together a puzzle that reveals the true scope of the threat facing their town. Through 11's fragmented memories and growing trust, the boys learn about the Upside Down, a dark reflection of their world, where everything familiar becomes twisted and hostile. It is a place of perpetual twilight, where ash falls like snow and vines pulse with malevolent life. The air itself tastes of decay, and shadows move with predatory intent. In this nightmare realm, a creature prowls, something the children come to call the Demogorgon, after the monster from their beloved game. It is a being of pure hunger, drawn to blood and fear, capable of tearing holes between dimensions to hunt in both worlds. The creature moves through Hawkins like a shark through dark water, invisible to most, but leaving a trail of missing persons and unexplained phenomena. Will, trapped in this hellish mirror world, struggles to survive using skills learned from countless campaigns in his basement game room. He hides, runs, and fights with the creativity of a child who has spent years imagining himself as a brave adventurer. But the Upside Down is cold and hostile, slowly draining his strength as he searches desperately for a way home. As the days pass, the boundary between the two worlds grows thinner. Strange occurrences multiply throughout Hawkins. Compasses spin wildly, electronics malfunction, and some residents report glimpsing impossible things in their peripheral vision. The Demogorgon's influence spreads like an infection, drawn by the electromagnetic anomalies created by Eleven's powers and the laboratory's experiments. Chief Hopper, initially skeptical of Joyce's claims about supernatural occurrences, begins his own investigation into the secretive activities at Hawkins' lab. His police instincts tell him that official explanations don't match the evidence he's uncovering. When he discovers that the lab has been monitoring his investigation, he realizes that the scope of the conspiracy reaches far beyond a simple missing child case. The government agents who run the facility will stop at nothing to contain their secrets, even if it means sacrificing innocent lives. They've created a monster they cannot control, and now they scramble to clean up the chaos while maintaining their cover story. For them, Will Byers is simply acceptable collateral damage in the pursuit of their larger goal. The various threads of investigation begin to weave together as our heroes realize they must work together to have any hope of success. Joyce and Hopper form an unlikely alliance, combining her maternal intuition with his investigative experience. Nancy and Jonathan put aside their social differences, united by their determination to save their loved ones. Meanwhile, the boys struggle to keep Eleven safe while using her abilities to locate Will and Barb. Each use of her powers draws unwanted attention and weakens her physically, but she pushes forward, driven by a desire to atone for her role in opening the door between worlds. The search leads them through abandoned buildings, hidden tunnels, and finally to the realization that the Hawkins lab sits at the center of the supernatural storm engulfing their town. The scientists there have been conducting experiments that tear at the very fabric of reality, and Eleven was both their greatest success and their ultimate failure. The final confrontation requires each group to face their deepest fear. Joyce and Hopper infiltrate the laboratory, demanding answers and fighting through layers of bureaucratic obstruction to reach the truth. They discover the portal to the Upside Down, a gaping wound in reality that pulses with otherworldly energy. Nancy, armed with determination and makeshift weapons, ventures into the Upside Down to search for Barb and confront the Demogorgon on its own territory. The nightmare landscape tests her courage, but her love for her friend gives her strength to navigate the hostile environment. The boys and Eleven prepare for their own battle, using their knowledge of games and strategy to plan an assault on a creature that exists beyond normal rule. They transform the middle school into a fortress, setting traps and preparing for a siege that will determine not just their own fates, but the safety of everyone in Hawkins. When the Demogorgon finally tracks them down, it brings with it the full horror of the Upside Down. The creature is a thing of nightmares, tall, gaunt, and eyeless, with a face that opens like a terrible flower to reveal rows of needle-sharp teeth. It moves with predatory grace, phasing between dimensions to strike when least expected. The battle is fierce but brief. Lucas and Dustin use slingshots and homemade weapons with the accuracy of kids who have spent countless hours in imaginary adventures. Mike shields Eleven, encouraging her to use her abilities despite the physical cost. And Eleven, drawing on reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed, confronts the monster she helped unleash upon the world. In a moment of supreme sacrifice, Eleven channels all her power to disintegrate the Demogorgon, disappearing along with the creature in a display of raw psychic energy that leaves only silence and ash. The boys are left to mourn the loss of their extraordinary friend, wondering if they will ever see her again. With the immediate threat neutralized, the rescue of Will becomes possible. Joyce and Hopper, guided by the scientists who created this crisis, venture into the Upside Down to find the boy who has become a symbol of everything they're fighting to protect. They navigate the twisted landscape following faint traces of Will's presence, refusing to give up hope even as the hostile environment tries to crush their spirit. They find Will in the nightmare version of the public library, unconscious and barely breathing, with a strange tube extending from his mouth to his throat. The Upside Down has been using him as a host, slowly consuming his life force, while keeping him alive for its own purposes. The rescue is a race against time, as Will's life hangs by the thinnest of threads. The boy they bring back to the normal world is forever changed by his ordeal. He has seen horrors that no child should witness, and has been touched by forces beyond human understanding. The recovery is slow and uncertain, marked by nightmares and strange episodes that suggest his connection to the Upside Down may not be completely severed. In the aftermath of the crisis, the government moves quickly to contain the story. Cover stories are crafted, evidence is destroyed, and witnesses are encouraged to forget what they have seen. The official narrative speaks of toxic chemical spills and child psychology, explaining away the supernatural with bureaucratic efficiency. But for those who lived through the truth, the scars remain. Nancy mourns the loss of Barb, whose fate was sealed by her disappearance into the Upside Down. The boys miss 11 terribly, hoping against hope that their friend somehow survived her sacrifice. Joyce watches Will carefully, seeing shadows in his eyes that speak of ongoing struggles with his traumatic experience. Chief Hopper makes a deal with the devils at Hawkins' lab, trading his silence for protection of the children and a measure of security for the town. He knows the price of this bargain, but accepts it as the cost of keeping his community safe from forces they cannot hope to understand or defeat through conventional means. Life in Hawkins slowly returns to a semblance of normalcy, but it is a different kind of normal. One where the adults carry new secrets and the children have learned that the world contains wonders and terrors beyond their wildest imagination. The boys return to their basement games, but their adventures now carry the weight of real experience. Will rejoins his friends for their weekly game, seemingly recovered but forever changed. He smiles and laughs with the others, but sometimes his attention drifts to shadows that shouldn't move or sounds that others cannot hear. The Upside Down may have released its physical hold on him, but its influence lingers like a whisper in the back of his mind. Nancy finds new purpose in her determination to honor Barb's memory and protect others from the hidden dangers that lurk beneath their peaceful town. Jonathan channels his protective instincts and artistic vision into documenting the truth, creating a record of events that official reports will never acknowledge. And somewhere, in the vast expanse between dimensions, 11 may still exist, changed, evolving, learning to navigate realities that extend far beyond the simple concepts of life and death. Her story is far from over, even as her friends learn to live with her absence. As autumn deepens into winter, the people of Hawkins settle into their new reality. The portal to the Upside Down has been sealed, the immediate threat contained. But those who know the truth understand that such dark forces are never truly defeated, only delayed. Will coughs up something strange in the privacy of the school bathroom, a slug-like creature that suggests his ordeal has left him fundamentally changed. The lights flicker around him just as they once did around 11, hinting at abilities that may be developing in response to his exposure to the other dimension. In the vast government facilities that exist beyond the reach of small-town law enforcement, new experiments continue. Scientists study samples and data from the Hawkins incident, planning their next steps in research that pushes the boundaries of human knowledge into realms that perhaps should remain unexplored. The boys go about their daily lives attending school, playing games, growing up in the way that children do even after experiencing the impossible. But they remain watchful, understanding now that their quiet town sits at the intersection of forces beyond normal comprehension. They have become guardians of secrets that could reshape the world's understanding of reality itself. And in the deepest part of their hearts, they continue to hope that somewhere in the vast mystery of existence, their friend 11 is safe and growing stronger, learning to master the extraordinary gifts that make her both vulnerable and powerful beyond measure. The story of Hawkins is far from over. It is a place where ordinary people have learned to coexist with extraordinary secrets, where children have faced adult terrors and emerged stronger, where the line between science and magic has been permanently blurred. As snow begins to fall on the quiet streets of this Indiana town, covering everything in pristine white, the residents sleep peacefully in their beds. But some dreams are filled with images of dark forests where ash falls like snow, and some sleepers wake with the memory of a girl who could move mountains with her mind and the echo of a friend's voice calling from impossibly far away. In Hawkins, even sleep carries the weight of wonders and the whisper promise that some stories never truly end. They simply wait, patient as shadows for the right moment to continue. The evening air in Hawkins, Indiana, carries the crisp bite of November, and the amber glow of streetlights creates pools of warmth against the encroaching darkness. In the Wheeler family basement, 4 boys huddle around a table scattered with dice, character sheets, and the remnants of an epic campaign that has stretched well into the night. Mike Wheeler, Lucas Sinclair, Dustin Henderson and Will Byers, friends bound by shared adventures both imagined and real. Will Byers sits quietly at the edge of the table, his gentle nature making him the heart of their small group. He sketches absently in the margins of his character sheet, his artistic mind always finding beauty in the mundane. Tonight, as their Dungeons & Dragons session winds down with the defeat of a terrible beast, Will packs his things with the careful precision of a boy who treasures his possessions. The ride home should be simple. A familiar path through neighborhoods where every house holds memories, where every corner has been explored during countless summer adventures. Will's bicycle cuts through the darkness, its small headlight creating a narrow tunnel of visibility in the vast night. The streets are empty, peaceful in the way that small towns can be when honest people sleep soundly in their beds. But tonight, something follows Will through the darkness. It begins as a feeling, that primitive instinct that tells prey when predators are near. The streetlights flicker as he passes, their steady glow stuttering like a dying heartbeat. The air itself seems to thicken, becoming heavy with a presence that doesn't belong in this world of suburban safety. Will pedals faster, his young heart hammering against his ribs as shadows seem to reach for him from between the houses. Then the lights go out entirely. In the suffocating darkness, Will hears something that makes his blood turn to ice. A sound like tearing fabric, but impossibly large, as if the very air is being ripped apart. A growl echoes from nowhere and everywhere, deep and alien and hungry. Will abandons his bicycle and runs, his sneakers slapping against asphalt as he races toward the one place he knows might offer sanctuary, the small shed behind his house. But safety is an illusion. As Will huddles in the cramped space fumbling for his father's old shotgun, the walls around him begin to decay and twist. The familiar shed transforms into something from a nightmare: rotting wood, creeping vines, and air that tastes of death and despair. The thing that hunts him has brought its own world with it, overlaying reality with something far more sinister. The shotgun clicks empty, door explodes inward. Will Byers disappears into a darkness that shouldn't exist, leaving behind only questions and the terrible certainty that Hawkins will never be the same. Morning brings Joyce Byers awake with the cruel efficiency of routine, but today routine shatters like glass against concrete. Will's bed is empty, untouched and cold. His bicycle sits abandoned on the roadside like a discarded toy, its small light still weakly glowing in the pale dawn. Joyce's hands shake as she touches the handlebars, still warm from her son's grip just hours before. The fear begins as a tight knot in her chest, but spreads through the town like ripples in a pond. Will Byers' quiet, artistic, beloved Will has simply vanished. In a place like Hawkins, where children are known by name and watched over by the entire community, such disappearances don't happen. They can't happen. Chief Jim Hopper arrives at the Byers' home, with the heavy footsteps of a man who has seen too much loss. His own daughter's death haunts every missing child case, and he approaches Joyce's panic with the careful patience of someone who understands that sometimes the impossible must be considered. The official investigation begins with questions that have no good answers, and searches that reveal nothing but empty spaces, where a boy should be. But Joyce knows her son in ways that official reports cannot capture. She knows the sound of his footsteps on the creaky floorboards, the way he hums when he thinks no one is listening, the particular quality of silence when he's drawing in his room. And now, in the absence of those familiar sounds, she begins to notice other things. things that make rational people question their sanity. The lights in the buyer's house begin to flicker with no apparent cause. Not the gentle dimming of old wiring, but violent, angry pulsing that seems to respond to some invisible presence. The telephone rings at all hours with calls that shouldn't exist. Static-filled connections, where Joyce swears she can hear Will's voice calling to her from an impossible distance. Other mothers might dismiss these incidents as stress-induced hallucinations. But Joyce Byers has learned to trust her instincts. She has survived on intuition and fierce maternal love. And both tell her that something unnatural has taken her. The fear that started as personal anguish begins to transform into something harder, more determined. If supernatural forces have will, then she will move heaven and hell to bring him home. At the edge of Hawkins, beyond the comfortable glow of streetlights and the reach of curious eyes, stands the Hawkins National Laboratory. Most residents accept the facility's presence without question. It's government work, energy research, classified but legitimate. The chain-link fences and warning signs are just necessary precautions for scientific advancement. But inside those sterile walls, Dr. Mark Brenner oversees research that blurs the line between science and horror. He is a man who speaks in gentle tones about terrible things, who offers fatherly comfort while conducting experiments that would make devils weep. His subjects are children, gifted, damaged, and utterly at his mercy. The girl known as 11 moves through the laboratory's corridors like a ghost made flesh. Her head is shaved bare, her clothing consists of simple hospital gowns, and her dark eyes hold depths that speak of experiences no child should endure. She possesses abilities that exist beyond the boundaries of accepted science, the power to move objects with her mind, to reach across vast distances with her consciousness, to touch the very fabric of reality itself. Brenner calls her his daughter, but his love is the cold affection of a scientist for a particularly valuable specimen. Each day brings new tests, new experiments designed to push her extraordinary abilities to their absolute limit. 11 has known no other life than this. A world of white walls, controlled environments, and the constant pressure to perform miracles on command. The experiments grow more dangerous as Brenner's ambitions expand. He forces 11 to make contact with distant subjects, to spy on foreign enemies, to explore the boundaries between dimensions. Each use of her powers drains her physically and emotionally, but she endures because she has never known that resistance is possible. Tonight's experiment is different. Tonight, Brenner demands that she make contact with something that exists in the spaces between worlds, a predator that lurks in the shadows of reality itself. 11 reaches out with her consciousness and touches something that should never be touched. In that moment of contact, she feels the creature's terrible hunger, its alien intelligence, and its sudden frightening awareness of her. The thing follows her psychic connection back to its source, tearing through the barriers between dimensions like paper. In the chaos that follows, alarms blaring, scientists screaming, reality itself seeming to buckle and tear, 11 makes a choice that will change everything. She runs. Mike Wheeler's discovery of 11 is the kind of encounter that changes lives forever. He finds her hiding in the gymnasium of Hawkins Middle School, soaked by rain and shivering from more than just cold. Her hospital gown clings to her thin frame and her bare feet are cut from running through the wood. But it's her eyes that capture Mike's attention. Dark, haunted, and holding secrets that a 12-year-old boy cannot begin to imagine. Most children would run or call for adults, but Mike sees past 11's strange appearance to the frightened girl beneath. He offers her food from his lunch, his jacket against the cold, and something she has rarely experienced: genuine kindness without expectation of return. She follows him home with the cautious trust of a wild animal, accepting shelter. Mike's friends Lucas and Dustin react with the predictable mix of skepticism and fascination that comes with adolescence. Lucas, ever practical, worries about the consequences of harboring a mysterious girl in Mike's basement. What if she's dangerous? What if she's escaped from some institution? What if helping her puts them all at risk? Dustin approaches the situation with scientific curiosity, bombarding 11 with questions she cannot or will not answer. Where did she come from? Why is her head shaved? What happened to her that left such shadows in her eye? But 11 remains largely silent, communicating more through gesture and expression than words. The turning point comes when frustration boils over into demonstration. 11, pushed to respond to their persistent questions, makes Mike's model airplane soar through the basement air, without touching it. The tiny aircraft hovers and dances at her silent command, defying every law of physics the boys thought they understood. In that moment, skepticism transforms into wonder, and 3 ordinary kids realize they are in the presence of something extraordinary. They call her Elle, and slowly she begins to trust these boys who treat her not as a test subject or a weapon, but as a friend. Through patient questions and gentle encouragement, they learn fragments of her story, the laboratory, the experiments, and most importantly, her connection to Will's disappearance. Through 11's fragmented memories and growing willingness to communicate, the boys learn about something that exists parallel to their world. A place Elle calls the Upside Down. It is a dark reflection of everything familiar where Hawkins exists in perpetual twilight and decay. Trees stand leafless and black against a sky that never sees sun. Ash falls like snow through air that tastes of death and decomposition. The Upside Down is not merely an alternate dimension, it is a predatory reality that seeks to consume and corrupt everything it touches. The creature that took Will exists there as apex predator, something the boys come to call the Demogorgon after the monster from their beloved game. It is a being of pure hunger drawn to blood and fear, capable of tearing holes between dimensions to hunt in both worlds. Elle's abilities allow her to peer into this nightmare realm, to see Will hiding in the cold and darkness, struggling to survive in an environment designed to drain life itself. He moves through the upside-down version of Hawkins like a ghost, taking shelter in familiar places transformed into houses of horror. The public library becomes a tomb of rotting books and creeping vines. His own home stands as a monument to decay, its warm memories twisted into something that mocks hope itself. But Will fights back with the creativity and determination of a child who has spent years imagining himself as a brave adventurer. He uses knowledge gained from countless gaming sessions to evade the Demogorgon, setting traps and finding hiding places in a world that offers no true sanctuary. His mother's voice reaches him sometimes through the lights, a lifeline of love that keeps him anchored to the world he desperately wants to return to. The revelation of the Upside Down sends waves of dread through anyone who learns of its existence. This is not simply a missing child case or even a supernatural mystery. It is the discovery that reality itself is far more fragile than anyone imagined. The safe, predictable world of Hawkins sits separated from nightmares by barriers as thin as tissue paper. Nancy Wheeler, Mike's older sister, faces her own encounter with the growing darkness that surrounds Hawkins. Her best friend Barb Holland disappears during a party at Steve Harrington's house, vanishing as completely and mysteriously as Will Byers. But unlike Will's disappearance, which mobilizes the entire town, Barb's absence goes largely unnoticed by adults who assume she simply went home early. Nancy knows better. Barb was loyal, cautious, and would never abandon Nancy at a party, especially one where Nancy was making choices that worried her conservative friend. The guilt of that night weighs heavily on Nancy's shoulders. The knowledge that her desire to fit in with the popular crowd led to her best friend's danger. Her search for answers draws her into the same web of supernatural terror that has trapped Will. Following a trail of strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena, Nancy finds herself face to face with the thin places where dimensions bleed through. She witnesses the Demogorgon hunting in the normal world, sees the creature's terrible grace as it phases between realities to stalk its prey. The encounter leaves Nancy forever changed. She has looked into the face of something that exists beyond human understanding, something that reduces all teenage concerns to insignificance. Her world, once defined by social hierarchies and romantic drama, now carries the weight of cosmic horror. Nancy's partnership with Jonathan Byers, Will's older brother and a fellow outsider, grows from their shared understanding that conventional help will not be enough. Jonathan possesses his mother's intuition and his brother's artistic sensitivity, seeing connections that others miss. Together they begin to arm themselves not just with weapons, but with the knowledge that they are fighting something that exists outside the normal rules of engagement. As the days pass and Will remains missing, the supernatural influences spreading through Hawkins become impossible to ignore. Electronics malfunction throughout the town. Radios play static-filled broadcasts from nowhere. Televisions display images that shouldn't exist, and compasses spin wildly as if magnetic north has become meaningless. Some residents report glimpsing impossible things in their peripheral vision. Shadows that move independently of their sources, figures standing in empty rooms, doorways that seem to lead to places that don't exist. These incidents increase in frequency and intensity, as if the barrier between worlds grows thinner with each passing hour. The Demogorgon's influence spreads like an infection through the fabric of reality itself. It is drawn by electromagnetic anomalies, by strong emotions, by the very life force that makes Hawkins a thriving community. Its presence warps the natural order, creating cold spots in warm rooms, dead zones where plants wither overnight, and spaces where sound seems muffled and distant. Chief Hopper's investigation into the secretive activities at Hawkins' lab reveals layers of conspiracy that reach far beyond local jurisdiction. Government agents monitor his movements, his phone calls are intercepted, and official channels provide nothing but carefully crafted lies. The scope of the cover-up suggests that what happened to Will is part of something much larger, experiments that treat human lives as acceptable losses in the pursuit of knowledge that perhaps should remain hidden. The boys struggle to keep Eleven safe while using her abilities to locate Will and understand the threat they all face. Each demonstration of her powers attracts unwanted attention and weakens her physically, but she pushes forward, driven by guilt over her role in opening the door between worlds. Her connection to the laboratory makes her both their greatest asset and their most vulnerable point. Brenner and his agents will stop at nothing to reclaim their escaped subject. As the supernatural crisis deepens, various groups investigating Will's disappearance begin to realize that their separate efforts must combine if they hope to succeed. Joyce and Hopper form an unlikely alliance, her maternal desperation balancing his law enforcement experience. Neither fully understands what they're fighting, but both recognize that convention approaches have failed. Nancy and Jonathan put aside social differences and teenage awkwardness, united by their determination to save their loved ones and stop the predator that stalks Hawkins. They gather weapons and supplies, preparing for a confrontation with something that exists beyond normal rules of engagement. The boys and Eleven plan their own defense, transforming their middle school into a fortress using knowledge gained from years of strategic gaming. They understand that they cannot outrun or hide from the Demogorgon indefinitely. Eventually, they must make a stand. The laboratory, meanwhile, scrambles to contain a situation that has spiraled far beyond their control. They've opened a door they cannot close, unleashed a creature they cannot command, and lost their most valuable subject to a group of children who have no understanding of the forces they're meddling with. Brenner's careful experiments have become a town-wide catastrophe that threatens to expose decades of illegal research. The convergence of these storylines creates a pressure cooker of tension that affects everyone in Hawkins. Even those who remain unaware of the supernatural threat feel the weight of something wrong in their community. Children have nightmares about monsters that seem too real. Adults find themselves checking locks multiple times before bed. And everyone carries the uncomfortable sensation of being watched by unseen eyes. The town of Hawkins holds its breath as various factions prepare for confrontations that will determine not just individual fates, but the safety of the entire community. The Demogorgon grows bolder, its attacks more frequent and visible. It has tasted blood and fear, and its appetite grows with each feeding. Joyce's house becomes a focal point for the supernatural activity, its lights pulsing with increasing intensity as Will's desperate attempts to communicate with his mother reach fever pitch. The walls themselves seem to breathe, and shadows move independently of any light source. The boundary between the normal world and the upside down grows so thin that visitors can almost see through to the nightmare realm beyond. At the laboratory, Brenner makes desperate preparations to recapture 11 and contain the dimensional breach before it expands beyond any hope of control. His agents fan out through Hawkins, searching for the children who have unknowingly become key players in a drama that threatens to rewrite the fundamental nature of reality. The boys, meanwhile, realize that their friendship and Eleven's powers may be the only thing standing between their town and complete catastrophization. They are children forced to become heroes, armed with slingshots and determination against forces that have driven grown men mad. Nancy and Jonathan steel themselves for a journey into the Upside Down itself, knowing that someone must confront the Demogorgon on its own territory if there's any hope of ending its reign of terror. They are teenagers preparing to enter hell, motivated by love for missing friends and the knowledge that no adult authority will or can help them. As night falls over Hawkins, all these converging forces prepare for battles that will test not just their courage, but their fundamental understanding of what is possible in a world where science has torn holes in the fabric of existence itself. The quiet streets of this Indiana town have become a battlefield where the stakes are nothing less than the survival of everything familiar and safe. And in the darkness between dimensions, hungry things wait for their chance to feed on a world that never imagined such nightmares could be real. The mounting tension reaches its breaking point, and Hawkins stands on the precipice of changes that will echo through time itself. In the deepest shadows of Hawkins, Indiana, something ancient and hungry stirs. It moves through darkness like water through a sieve, slipping between the spaces where reality grows thin. The creature has no name in any human language, but the children who first encounter its terror will come to call it the Demogorgon, a monster pulled from their fantasy games to describe a nightmare made flesh. The Demogorgon exists in a realm parallel to our own, a twisted reflection of the familiar world where everything beloved becomes corrupt and threatening. This place, the Upside Down, mirrors Hawkins in every detail, but strips away all warmth, all life, all hope. Streets become canyons of decay, houses stand as monuments to despair, and the very air tastes of death and forgotten dreams. The creature itself defies easy description. Tall as a grown man but gaunt beyond human possibility, it moves with predatory grace through both worlds. Its skin is the color of old leather, stretched tight over bones that seem to shift and realign with each movement. But it is the face, or the absence of a face, that haunts those unlucky enough to witness it. Where features should be, there is only a terrible flower of flesh that opens to reveal concentric circles of razor-sharp teeth, each one designed for tearing and consuming. The Demogorgon hunts by scent and sound, drawn to the copper tang of blood and the rapid heartbeat of fear. It can phase between dimensions at will, appearing in our world just long enough to strike before vanishing back into its realm of perpetual twilight. When it moves between worlds, reality itself seems to buckle and tear, creating wounds in the fabric of existence that bleed darkness and despair. For weeks, the creature has been testing the boundaries between worlds, drawn by electromagnetic anomalies emanating from the Hawkins National Laboratory. Each experiment conducted in those sterile halls creates ripples that the Demogorgon feels like a shark sensing blood in water. It has been patient, learning, waiting for the perfect moment to cross over and claim new hunting grounds. That moment arrives on a quiet November evening when a 12-year-old boy named Will Byers pedals his bicycle through the empty streets of Hawkins, unaware that something impossible has begun to stalk him through the darkness. Will's encounter with the Demogorgon begins not with sight, but with sensation, that primitive awareness that tells prey when predators are near. The streetlights along his familiar route home begin to flicker and dim, their steady glow stuttering like a dying heart. The November air, crisp with autumn's promise of winter, suddenly thickens with an otherworldly presence that makes breathing feel like drowning. Behind him, reality tears with a sound like fabric ripping, but impossibly loud and deep. The Demogorgon steps through the wound between worlds, bringing with it the cold and decay of the Upside Down. Its eyeless face turns toward Will with the unerring accuracy of a predator that has found its prey. The creature's flower-like mouth opens, tasting the boy's fear on the night air. Will abandons his bicycle and runs, his young legs carrying him through neighborhoods that suddenly feel alien and hostile. Every shadow could hide the creature. Every darkened window could be a portal to that nightmare realm. Behind him, the Demogorgon follows with patient inevitability, not rushing because it knows that in this hunt, time is on its side. The boy reaches the small shed behind his house, a place of childhood comfort where he and his father once shared quiet moments, fixing broken things. But comfort is an illusion tonight. As Will fumbles for his father's old shotgun, the walls around him begin to decay and warp. The familiar shed transforms into something from the upside down, rotting wood, creeping vines, and air that tastes of despair. The Demogorgon has brought its world with it, overlaying reality with its own twisted version. Will fires the shotgun, but the creature is no longer bound by the rules of physics he understands. It phases between dimensions, appearing now here, now there, always close. The boy's last sight before being dragged into the upside down is the creature's terrible mouth opening like a Venus flytrap, ready to consume not just his body, but his very existence. The Demogorgon's presence in Hawkins creates ripples of supernatural disturbance that spread through the town like infection. Animals flee the area in instinctive terror, leaving the streets unusually quiet and empty. Dogs refuse to walk certain routes, cats hide in basements, and even the hardiest farm animals huddle together as if sensing an apex predator beyond their understanding. Electronics throughout Hawkins begin to malfunction in ways that suggest the creature's interdimensional nature affects the very electromagnetic spectrum. Radios pick up transmissions that seem to come from another world. Static-filled voices, speaking in desperate whispers, the sound of wind through dead trees, and underneath it all, a low growling that makes listeners' skin crawl. Joyce Byers experiences the most direct manifestation of the creature's influence. The lights in her home pulse and flicker with increasing violence, responding to Will's desperate attempts to communicate from the upside down. But they also respond to the Demogorgon's presence, surging with malevolent energy whenever the creature draws near. The Christmas lights, Joyce strings throughout the house, become a primitive communication system, spelling out messages that blur the line between hope and horror. The telephone in the Byers' house rings with calls that shouldn't exist, connections to the upside down where Joyce can hear her son's voice calling for help across impossible distances. But these same calls carry other sounds. The wet breathing of something hungry, the scrape of claws against surfaces that exist in both worlds, and the terrible certainty that the thing hunting Will is aware of her listening. When Joyce tries to answer one of these phantom calls, the phone itself becomes a portal. The Demogorgon's presence surges through the connection, causing the device to spark and smoke before erupting in a shower of sparks and otherworldly energy. The wall behind the phone cracks and bleeds a substance that exists nowhere in nature, black ether that seems to pulse with its own malevolent life.
At Hawkins National Laboratory, Dr. Martin Brenner and his team monitor the growing crisis with the cold calculation of scientists who have unleashed forces beyond their control. They track the Demogorgon's movements through electromagnetic sensors and radiation detectors, watching half-lessly as their greatest experiment becomes their worst nightmare. The creature was never supposed to cross over permanently. 11's psychic abilities were meant to provide brief glimpses into parallel dimensions, intelligence gathering that would give America an insurmountable advantage in the Cold War. But the girl's powers proved more volatile than Brenner anticipated, and her accidental contact with the Demogorgon created a bridge between worlds that refuses to close. Now the creature roams freely between dimensions, learning the layout of Hawkins through trial and error. It establishes hunting patterns, identifies vulnerable targets, and begins to understand that this new world offers prey more numerous and accessible than anything in the Upside Down. Security footage from around town captures glimpses of the creature's shadows that move wrong, shapes that don't belong, and brief moments where something impossible steps into frame before vanishing again. Brenner's team attempts to track and contain the Demogorgon using conventional methods, but the creature exists beyond the reach of tranquilizer darts and capture nets. It phases between worlds whenever threatened, strikes from unexpected angles, and demonstrates an intelligence that adapts quickly to human tactics. The hunters become the hunted as laboratory personnel begin to disappear during night shifts, leaving behind only scattered equipment and walls stained with that otherworldly. The government cover-up begins immediately, but explaining away an interdimensional predator proves challenging even for practiced liars. Missing persons reports are buried, security footage is confiscated, and witnesses are encouraged to forget what they've seen through methods both legal and questionable. The official story speaks of toxic chemical spills and animal attacks, but some truths are too large to contain indefinitely. Nancy Wheeler's best friend Barb Holland becomes the Demogorgon's second victim, taken during what should have been a harmless teenage party. Sitting alone by Steve Harrington's swimming pool, feeling out of place and worried about Nancy's choices, Barb cuts her hand on a broken beer bottle. The scent of blood draws the creature like a beacon across dimensional boundaries. The Demogorgon appears beside the pool with the suddenness of a nightmare made real. Barb has only a moment to register its impossible presence. The eyeless face, the flower mouth opening to reveal rows of teeth. The way reality seems to bend around its form before being dragged into the Upside Down. Her terrified scream echoes across both dimensions, a sound that will haunt Nancy's dreams for years to come. In the Upside Down version of the Harrington house, Barb finds herself trapped in a world designed to drain hope itself. The swimming pool has become a stagnant pit filled with thick, dark water that reflects no light. The house stands as a monument to decay, its walls covered in the same pulsing vines that seem to be the Upside Down's equivalent of vegetation. And somewhere in that twisted landscape, the Demogorgon makes its lair. Barb's fate serves as a grim preview of what awaits Will if he cannot be rescued. The Upside Down is not merely a prison. It is a predatory dimension that slowly consumes everything it touches. Life force, hope, even memory seem to leach away in that place of perpetual twilight. Those taken by the Demogorgon don't simply die. They are absorbed into the very fabric of a reality designed to feed on suffering. Nancy's discovery of Barb's disappearance leads her to the truth about the creature hunting Hawkins. Her guilt over abandoning her friend drives her to take increasingly dangerous risks, following the trail of supernatural disturbances that mark the Demogorgon's passage through the normal world. She witnesses the creature's terrible grace as it phases between dimensions, and understands with growing horror that conventional weapons and normal courage will not be enough to stop it. Mike Wheeler, Lucas Sinclair and Dustin Henderson learn about the Demogorgon through Eleven's fragmented memories and psychic demonstration. Using Mike's Dungeons & Dragons set as a visual aid, Elle shows them the creature that has been hunting their friend, a predator that exists beyond the rules of any game they've ever played. The boys watch in fascination and growing dread as Eleven makes the game pieces move without touching them, demonstrating how the Demogorgon can phase between worlds to strike without warning. She shows them the dark reflection of their middle school, the twisted version of Hawkins that exists in the Upside Down, and the terrible patience with which the creature stalks its prey. Through careful questions and Elle's limited vocabulary, they learn that the Demogorgon feeds on more than just flesh. It consumes life force itself, drawing strength from the fear and despair of its victim. This is why Will has survived longer than should be possible in the Upside Down. His hope and determination provide the creature with a more satisfying meal than quick death would offer. The revelation transforms their understanding of what they're fighting. This is not simply a rescue mission. It's a race against time before the Demogorgon finishes consuming Will's essence entirely. Each day he spends in the Upside Down weakens him further, making him less likely to survive even if they manage to bring him home. Lucas, ever practical, focuses on the creature's weaknesses and attack patterns. If it's drawn to blood and fear, they can use those impulses against it. If it phases between dimensions when threatened, They need to find ways to trap it in one world or the other. His strategic mind begins crafting plans that treat the supernatural threat like an opponent in their favorite game. Dustin approaches the situation with scientific curiosity, asking questions about the creature's biology and the physics of interdimensional travel. How does it track prey across worlds? What prevents it from simply phasing away when attacked? Understanding the Demogorgon's nature becomes crucial to developing tactics that might actually work against it. Mike focuses on Eleven's emotional state, recognizing that her guilt over opening the portal between worlds drives her willingness to confront the creature despite the personal cost. He offers her the friendship and acceptance she's never known, creating bonds of loyalty that will prove crucial in the battles to come.
As the Demogorgon grows bolder in its hunting, the encounters with Hawkins' residents become more frequent and terrifying. The creature appears in brief glimpses that leave witnesses questioning their sanity. A shadow that moves independently of any light source. A figure standing in empty hallways that vanishes when directly observed. Sounds of breathing where no one should be. Jonathan Byers has his first encounter with the creature while developing photographs in his makeshift darkroom. The chemical smells that fill the small space seem to attract the Demogorgon's attention, and Jonathan becomes aware of being watched by something that doesn't belong in his world. When he finally works up the courage to look behind him, the creature is there, tall, gaunt, and impossibly wrong, studying him with the patient interest of a predator evaluating prey. The encounter lasts only seconds before the Demogorgon phases back to the Upside Down. But those seconds stretch like hours in Jonathan's memory. He has looked into the face of something that exists beyond human understanding. Something that reduces all his teenage concerns to meaningless noise. The experience leaves him forever changed, carrying the knowledge that reality is far more fragile than anyone imagines. Nancy's encounter comes later, when her investigation into Barb's disappearance leads her too close to one of the thin places where dimensions bleed through. She finds herself temporarily pulled into the Upside Down, experiencing firsthand the cold despair of that twisted realm. The Demogorgon stalks her through the nightmare version of the woods behind Steve's house, its flower mouth opening and closing as it tastes her terror on the poisoned air. Only luck and desperation allow Nancy to find her way back to the normal world. But the experience teaches her that conventional weapons and normal courage will not be enough to stop the creature. She begins gathering supplies and allies, understanding that the fight for Hawkins and for Will require sacrifices that no teenager should have to make. The creature's presence begins affecting even those who never see it direct. Children wake from nightmares they cannot quite remember. Adults find themselves checking locks multiple times before bed. And everyone in Hawkins carries the uncomfortable sensation of being watched by unseen eyes. The town's collective unconscious recognizes the presence of an apex predator, even if conscious minds refuse to accept such impossible truths. In the Upside Down, Will Byers fights for his life using skills learned from countless hours of fantasy gaming and his own artistic imagination. The nightmare realm that mirrors Hawkins offers no true sanctuary, but Will's creativity and determination allow him to stay one step ahead of the creature that hunts him with patient inevitability. He moves through the twisted landscape like a ghost, taking shelter in familiar places transformed into houses of horror. The public library becomes his primary hideout, its upside-down version filled with rotting books and walls covered in pulsing vines, but still offering multiple exits and hiding places among the decaying stacks. Will learns the Demogorgon's hunting patterns through careful observation and near-death experiences. The creature is most active during what passes for night in the Upside Down, when the perpetual twilight deepens to something approaching true darkness. It tracks by scent and movement, but seems less aware of prey that remains perfectly still for extended periods. The boy creates a network of safe houses throughout the upside-down version of Hawkins, stockpiling supplies and establishing escape routes between them. His childhood games of hide-and-seek become deadly serious as he learns to move without sound through a world where every footstep could attract the creature's attention. But survival comes at a cost. The Upside Down itself is predatory, slowly draining Will's life force even as it protects him from immediate discovery. The air tastes of decay and despair, making each breath an effort. The cold seeps into his bones and strange spores drift through the atmosphere like snow, carrying with them a corruption that affects both body and spirit. Will's attempts to communicate with his mother through the lights provide brief moments of hope in an otherwise hopeless situation. He discovers that strong emotions can bridge the gap between dimensions, allowing him to influence electrical systems in the normal world. These communications become increasingly desperate as his strength fades and the Demogorgon's pursuit grows more relentless.
As Will's situation becomes more desperate, the urgency to mount a rescue operation intensifies. 11's psychic abilities allow the boys to monitor his condition, and what they discover fills them with growing dread. Will is weakening rapidly, his life force being slowly consumed by both the predatory environment and the creature that stalks him. The Demogorgon has begun using Will as bait, allowing him to remain alive but drawing closer with each passing day. The creature has learned that fear and desperation make prey more flavorful, and it feeds on Will's terror as much as his physical presence. This psychological torture serves the creature's purposes, while slowly driving its victim toward complete despair. Joyce's increasingly frantic behavior reflects the supernatural pressure building throughout Hawkins. She tears down the wallpaper in her living room, following the path of strange growths that seem to pulse with their own light. When she breaks through the wall itself, she discovers organic material that belongs to no earthly ecosystem. Further proof that the boundaries between worlds have become dangerously thin. Chief Hopper's investigation leads him to the truth about the laboratory's experiments and the creature they've unleashed. His confrontation with Dr. Brenner reveals the scope of the government conspiracy and the methods they're willing to use to contain their secret. The officials treat Will's life as acceptable collateral damage in their larger game of international espionage and dimensional research. Nancy and Jonathan's partnership develops into a relationship built on shared trauma and desperate determination. They gather weapons and supplies, preparing for a mission into the Upside Down that both recognize as likely suicidal. Their youth becomes an advantage. Adults might hesitate before such impossible odds, but teenagers possess the reckless courage that desperate situations require. The convergence of all these storylines creates the foundation for a rescue mission that will test everyone involved beyond their limits. 11's guilt over opening the portal between worlds drives her to volunteer for a confrontation with the Demogorgon, despite the obvious personal cost. Her psychic abilities make her uniquely qualified to fight the creature, but using them in direct combat will likely prove fatal. Mike, Lucas, and Dustin transform their middle school into a fortress using knowledge gained from years of strategic gaming and teenage ingenuity. They gather supplies, set traps, and prepare defensive positions, with the systematic thoroughness of generals planning a crucial battle. Their friendship becomes their greatest weapon, the unshakable loyalty that allows them to trust each other completely in impossible circumstances. The boys' plan centers on using 11 as both weapon and bait, drawing the Demogorgon into a controlled environment where they can engage it on relatively equal terms. The middle school provides multiple defensive positions, narrow corridors that limit the creature's mobility, and enough space to implement the tactics they've developed through countless hours of fantasy combat. Joyce and Hopper prepare for their own mission into the Upside Down, following the psychic trail that 11 has established to Will's location. They understand that they're venturing into a realm designed to drain hope itself, but parental love and professional duty drive them forward despite the obvious danger. Nancy and Jonathan ready themselves to fight the Demogorgon in its own territory, knowing that someone must confront the creature away from the children if there's any hope of ending its reign of terror. They are teenagers preparing to enter hell, motivated by love for missing friends and the knowledge that no adult authority will or can help them. The final confrontation begins simultaneously across multiple locations, as our heroes implement their desperate plan to save Will and stop the Demogorgon's rampage. At the middle school, the boys and 11 prepare for a siege that will test every skill they've learned from years of fantasy gaming and months of supernatural terror. The Demogorgon arrives with the patient inevitability of a natural disaster, drawn by 11's psychic signature and the boys' carefully orchestrated bait. It phases through the school's walls with contemptuous ease, bringing with it the cold and decay of the Upside Down. The creature's presence warps reality around it, causing lights to flicker and shadows to move independently of their sources. The battle that follows tests courage beyond any game the boys have ever played. Lucas and Dustin use slingshots and improvised weapons with accuracy born of years of practice. But their attacks serve mainly to distract the creature rather than cause real damage. Mike positions himself between Eleven and the Demogorgon, offering his own life to protect the girl who has become central to their group. Eleven herself becomes the focal point of the confrontation, drawing on reserves of power she didn't know she possessed. Her psychic abilities manifest as visible energy that crackles through the air like lightning. But each use of her powers drains her life force at an alarming rate. She is literally burning herself out to save her friends and stop the creature she helped unleash upon the world. The climactic moment arrives when Eleven makes the ultimate sacrifice, channeling all her remaining power into a single devastating attack that disintegrates the Demogorgon at the molecular level. The creature's destruction creates a psychic shockwave that ripples across dimensions, but the effort proves too much for Eleven's young body. She disappears along with the monster, leaving only silence and the echo of friendship that transcends even death itself. While the battle rages at the middle school, Joyce and Hopper venture into the Upside Down to retrieve Will from the nightmare realm that has held him prisoner. They navigate the twisted landscape wearing improvised hazmat suits, following psychic breadcrumbs that Eleven laid down during her final sacrifice. The Upside Down reveals itself as a predatory dimension designed to consume hope itself. Every familiar landmark from Hawkins has been transformed into something hostile and wrong. Streets become canyons of decay, houses stand as monuments to despair, and the very air carries spores that seem to infect both body and spirit with their otherworldly corruption. They find Will in the nightmare version of the public library, unconscious and barely breathing, with a strange tube extending from his mouth to his throat. The Upside Down has been using him as both host and prey, slowly consuming his life force while keeping him alive for its own purposes. The rescue becomes a race against time as Will's vital signs fade with each passing moment. The journey back to the normal world tests Joyce and Hopper's resolve as the dying dimension seems to fight their escape. Reality itself becomes unstable around them, with passages shifting and walls bleeding the black ether that serves as the Upside Down's equivalent of blood. Only their desperate determination to save an innocent child gives them the strength to navigate impossible geography and return to a world where hope still exists. Will's rescue marks the end of his ordeal in the Upside Down, but not the end of his connection to that nightmare realm. The boy they bring back carries within him traces of the dimension's corruption, seeds that will continue to grow and develop in ways that even his rescuers cannot imagine. His story becomes one of survival against impossible odds, but also of transformation by forces beyond human understanding. The victory comes at tremendous cost. Eleven's sacrifice has closed the portal between worlds and destroyed the immediate threat, but questions remain about other creatures that might exist in the spaces between dimensions. Hawkins has been saved, but its residents now carry the knowledge that reality is far more fragile than they ever imagined, and that some doors once opened can never be completely closed again.
In the quiet town of Hawkins, Indiana, ordinary children find themselves called to extraordinary bravery as they face a threat that exists beyond the boundaries of their safe, familiar world. Mike Wheeler, Lucas Sinclair, and Dustin Henderson have spent their young lives playing games of heroism and adventure, but now they must summon real courage to save their friend Will Byers from forces that dwarf any challenge they've ever imagined. The boys gather in Mike's basement, their usual sanctuary of games and friendship transformed into a war room where life and death decisions must be made. The Dungeons and Dragons board sits before them, but tonight it serves as more than entertainment. It becomes a map of strategy, a way to understand the impossible creature that has taken their friend and threatens their entire community. Mike emerges as their natural leader, his protective instincts sharpened by the presence of Eleven, the mysterious girl who has become the key to their mission. His voice carries new authority as he outlines their desperate plan, but beneath the confidence lies the trembling awareness that they are children preparing to face a monster that has already claimed lives and shattered the illusion of safety in their hometown. Lucas approaches their situation with the practical mind of a strategist, gathering intelligence about the Demogorgon's weaknesses and attack patterns. His initial suspicion of Eleven gradually transforms into respect and acceptance as he recognizes her genuine desire to help, despite the terrible cost her assistance might demand. The slingshot in his hands becomes more than a toy. It's a weapon chosen by a young warrior who understands that sometimes the smallest acts of defiance can change everything. Dustin brings scientific curiosity to their group, asking the hard questions about interdimensional physics and creature biology that adults might dismiss as impossible. His enthusiasm for understanding the supernatural threat reflects the kind of intellectual courage that refuses to be defeated by incomprehensible odds. When he speaks of electromagnetic fields and psychic phenomena, he does so with the wonder of a natural scientist discovering new laws of reality. Together, these three boys represent the best of childhood: loyalty, curiosity, and the unshakable belief that friendship can overcome any obstacle. Their determination to save Will grows stronger with each passing hour, fueled by memories of shared adventures and the knowledge that abandoning their friend would mean abandoning everything they believe about what it means to be truly brave. Among the children preparing for battle, 11 carries the heaviest burden of all. Her presence in their group represents both their greatest hope and their most heartbreaking tragedy. A young girl who has known nothing but exploitation and experimentation, now asked to risk everything for friends who have shown her the first genuine kindness of her life. The laboratory where 11 spent her childhood was a place designed to strip away everything that makes children human. Dr. Martin Brenner, the man she called Papa, spoke to her in gentle tones while conducting experiments that pushed her extraordinary abilities to their absolute limit. Each test, each demonstration of her telekinetic powers, came at the cost of her physical and emotional well-being. But she endured because she knew no other existence. Her memories of those sterile white rooms carry the weight of profound isolation. She was a prisoner disguised as a patient, a weapon disguised as a daughter, a child whose incredible gifts made her valuable to adults who saw her as an object rather than a person. The numbers tattooed on her wrist, 01 Revan, represent not just her designation in Brenner's program, but the systematic dehumanization that robbed her of even the basic dignity of a name. The other children in the program existed as ghosts in 11's memory, fellow subjects who disappeared when their powers proved insufficient or when their minds finally broke under the pressure of constant testing. She learned early that showing weakness meant vanishing forever, so she developed a stoic exterior that masks a heart desperate for connection and acceptance. When 11 first demonstrated her abilities to Mike, Lucas, and Dustin by levitating Mike's model airplane, she watched their faces carefully for signs of fear or revulsion. Instead, she found wonder and acceptance, emotions so foreign to her experience that she initially distrusted them. These boys saw her telekinetic powers not as tools to be exploited, but as an amazing part of who she was as a person. The friendship they offered her represented everything she had been denied during her years of captivity. Simple acts of kindness, sharing food, offering warm clothes, including her in their plans, carried profound meaning for a girl who had never experienced unconditional acceptance. When Mike told her she was their friend, he gave her something more valuable than freedom. He gave her belonging. But with acceptance came responsibility, and 11 understood that her accidental opening of the portal between worlds had unleashed the Demogorgon upon Hawkins. Her guilt over Will's disappearance and Barb's death weighs heavily on her young shoulders, driving her to volunteer for a confrontation with the creature despite knowing it will likely cost her life.
As the supernatural crisis deepens, the emotional cost of their battle begins to manifest in each of the heroes. The weight of facing impossible odds, combined with the knowledge that their actions will determine the fate of their community, creates pressures that test the limits of their psychological resilience. Joyce Byers embodies the fierce determination of maternal love pushed beyond all reasonable boundaries. Her desperate search for Will has consumed every aspect of her life, transforming her from a struggling single mother into a woman possessed by the singular purpose of bringing her son home. The supernatural manifestations in her house, the flickering lights, the phantom phone calls, the wall that pulses with otherworldly life, have pushed her to the edge of what anyone should be expected to endure. Her conversations with the lights, her desperate attempts to communicate with Will across dimensional barriers, reveal the depth of a mother's love when faced with the unthinkable. Each flicker of illumination represents hope and heartbreak in equal measure, proof that her son still lives,
but also confirmation that he exists in a realm of suffering beyond her ability to reach. Chief Jim Hopper carries his own emotional burden as he confronts the truth about the government conspiracy that has endangered his community. His investigation into the Hawkins National Laboratory forces him to relive the trauma of his own daughter's death, but also gives him a chance to prevent another parent from experiencing that ultimate loss. His alliance with Joyce represents the meeting of two damaged souls united by their determination to save an innocent child. Nancy Wheeler struggles with overwhelming guilt over her role in Barb's disappearance. Her decision to attend Steve's party, her choice to leave her loyal friend alone by the pool, haunts every moment of her search for the truth. The discovery that Barb was taken by an interdimensional predator while Nancy was distracted by teenage romance creates a burden of responsibility that transforms her from a typical high school student into someone willing to risk everything for redemption. Jonathan Byers channels his protective instincts and artistic sensitivity into documenting the supernatural threat that has claimed his brother. His photographs capture glimpses of the Demogorgon that others might dismiss as tricks of light and shadow, but they also represent his way of fighting back against forces that seem too large and impossible to defeat through conventional means. The boys themselves struggle with the realization that their childhood games have become deadly serious. The fantasy adventures they've enjoyed for years suddenly carry real consequences, and their beloved hobby becomes a tool for survival against actual monsters. The transition from play to reality tests their friendship and forces them to grow up far faster than any children should. The unlikely partnership between Nancy Wheeler and Jonathan Byers represents the power of shared trauma to create bonds that transcend social boundaries. Nancy, popular and privileged, and Jonathan, artistic and isolated, would normally occupy completely different worlds within the social hierarchy of Hawkins High School. But their mutual loss, Nancy's missing friend and Jonathan's missing brother, creates a connection that bridges every superficial difference. Their first encounter over Jonathan's photographs of the party where Barb disappeared reveals the depth of their respective guilt and determination. Nancy's anger at being photographed without permission quickly transforms into understanding when she realizes that Jonathan's pictures might contain clues about what happened to their loved ones. The images capture shadows that shouldn't exist and figures that seem to exist between dimensions. Together they begin to piece together the truth about the creature that stalks Hawkins. Nancy's social connections provide access to information and resources, while Jonathan's artistic eye helps them interpret the visual evidence of supernatural activity. Their investigation draws them deeper into danger as they realize that conventional authorities are either unable or unwilling to acknowledge the threat facing their community. The emotional toll of their partnership deepens as they share stories about the people they're trying to save. Nancy's descriptions of Barb's loyalty and kindness reveal the depth of her guilt over abandoning her friend. Jonathan's memories of Will's gentle nature and artistic talents show how much his brother means to him beyond their family bond. These conversations create an intimacy born of shared purpose and mutual understanding. Their decision to enter the Upside Down together represents the ultimate expression of their partnership. They are teenagers preparing to venture into hell, armed with improvised weapons and desperate courage. Their youth becomes both a disadvantage and an advantage. They lack the experience to fully understand the dangers they face, but they also possess the reckless bravery that desperate situations require. The preparation for their mission reveals new depths to both characters. Nancy's transformation from popular student to determined warrior shows the strength that was always present beneath her social concerns. Jonathan's evolution from isolated observer to active participant demonstrates how love for family can overcome even the most introverted nature.
As the time for confrontation approaches, each group of heroes makes their final preparations with the solemnity of soldiers preparing for a battle they may not survive. The knowledge that Will's time is running out adds urgency to every decision, while the understanding that the Demogorgon grows stronger with each feeding creates pressure that tests their resolve. At the middle school, the boys and 11 transform their familiar environment into a fortress designed to contain and destroy an interdimensional predator. They use their knowledge of the building's layout to create strategic advantages, setting traps in narrow hallways and establishing defensive positions that maximize their limited resources. The gymnasium becomes their primary battleground, a space large enough for maneuver,
but enclosed enough to prevent the creature's escape. Lucas takes charge of weapons procurement, gathering slingshots, baseball bats, and improvised projectiles with the systematic thoroughness of a military quartermaster. His practical mind focuses on the mechanics of combat, calculating angles of attack and fields of fire with the precision of someone who understands that small mistakes in preparation can lead to catastrophic failure in execution. Dustin applies his scientific knowledge to understanding the creature's weaknesses, theorizing about the electromagnetic properties that might make it vulnerable to certain types of attack. His research into the Demogorgon's interdimensional nature helps them develop tactics that might actually work against a being that exists beyond normal physical laws. Mike coordinates their overall strategy while providing emotional support to Eleven, who grows quieter and more withdrawn as the confrontation approaches. He recognizes that her willingness to face the Demogorgon comes from guilt and self-sacrifice rather than confidence in victory, and he works to remind her that she has value beyond her usefulness as a weapon. Joyce and Hopper prepare for their own mission with the grim determination of adults who understand the full scope of what they're attempting. Their plan to enter the Upside Down and retrieve Will requires them to trust in equipment and theories that exist at the edge of scientific possibility. The hazmat suits they wear provide minimal protection against an environment designed to drain hope itself. Nancy and Jonathan's preparations focus on gathering weapons and supplies for their confrontation with the Demogorgon in its own territory. They transform ordinary household items into instruments of war. Gasoline becomes napalm, Christmas lights become early warning systems, and bear traps become interdimensional snares. Their improvised arsenal reflects both their desperation and their determination to fight back against impossible odds. The moment of truth arrives simultaneously across multiple locations, as our heroes implement their desperate plan to save Will and stop the Demogorgon's rampage. The coordination of their efforts represents the ultimate expression of their shared commitment to protecting their community even at the cost of their own lives. At the laboratory, Joyce and Hopper confront Brenner and his team, demanding access to the portal between worlds and the truth about the experiments that unleashed the creature upon Hawkins. Their righteous anger cuts through layers of bureaucratic obfuscation and government secrecy, forcing the scientists to acknowledge their responsibility for the crisis that threatens to consume the entire town. The portal itself appears as a wound in reality, a gaping tear in the wall that pulses with otherworldly energy and bleeds the strange atmosphere of the Upside Down into the normal world. The sight of it confirms Joyce's worst fears about the nature of the forces that have taken her son, but also provides concrete proof that rescue is possible if they can summon the courage to enter that nightmare realm. Meanwhile, at the middle school, the boys and Eleven prepare for their own battle with growing awareness that they may be making their final stand together. The building around them feels different in the approaching darkness. Familiar hallways seem longer and more threatening, and shadows move with purpose that suggests they are no longer alone. Nancy and Jonathan position themselves in the buyer's house, transforming Joyce's modest home into a trap designed to lure the Demogorgon into a controlled environment where they can engage it on something approaching equal term. Their preparation rituals, checking weapons, reviewing their plan, sharing what might be their final words to each other, carry the weight of soldiers facing impossible odds. The convergence of these storylines creates a pressure cooker of tension that affects everyone involved. Each group understands that their actions will determine not just their own fates, but the survival of everyone they care about. The weight of that responsibility transforms ordinary people into heroes, but it also tests the limits of what any individual should be asked to bear. The final confrontation begins when the Demogorgon arrives at the middle school with the patient inevitability of a natural disaster. The creature's presence warps reality around it, causing lights to flicker and shadows to behave independently of their sources. It moves through the building's walls with contemptuous ease, bringing with it the cold and decay of the Upside Down. Eleven faces the creature that her accidental psychic contact helped release upon the world. And in that moment, all her guilt and determination crystallize into a single devastating purpose. She understands that her extraordinary abilities make her uniquely qualified to stop the Demogorgon, But she also knows that channeling enough power to destroy the creature will likely cost her life. The boys position themselves around her with weapons drawn, ready to fight an interdimensional predator with slingshots and desperate courage. Their loyalty to their friend gives them strength beyond their years, but they also understand that this battle will test every bond of friendship they've forged over years of shared adventure. When the Demogorgon finally reveals itself in the gymnasium, it brings with it the full horror of the Upside Down. The creature stands tall and gaunt, its eyeless face opening like a terrible flower to reveal concentric circles of razor-sharp teeth. Its very presence seems to drain warmth from the air and hope from the heart. But the children stand their ground with the courage of young heroes who have chosen to fight rather than flee. Lucas and Dustin unleash their arsenal of improvised weapons with accuracy born of years of practice. But their attacks serve mainly to distract the creature rather than cause significant damage. Their bravery in the face of impossible odds represents the best of human courage, the willingness to stand against overwhelming darkness even when victory seems impossible. Mike positions himself between 11 and the Demogorgon, offering his own life to protect the girl who has become central to their group. His declaration that she is their friend and that they will protect her carries the weight of absolute commitment, the kind of loyalty that transcends fear and transforms ordinary people into heroes. 11 herself becomes the focal point of the confrontation, drawing on reserves of power she didn't know she possessed. Her psychic abilities manifest as visible energy that crackles through the air like lightning, but each use of her powers drains her life force at an alarming rate. She is literally burning herself out to save her friends and stop the creature she helped unleash upon the world. The climactic moment arrives when 11 makes the ultimate sacrifice, channeling all her remaining power into a single devastating attack that disintegrates the Demogorgon at the molecular level. The effort required to destroy such a powerful creature pushes her abilities beyond all sustainable limits, and she disappears along with the monster in a display of raw psychic energy that leaves only silence and the echo of friendship that transcends even death itself. Her final words to Mike, "Goodbye," carry the weight of a young girl who has finally found people worth dying for. In that moment, she transforms from a weapon created by government scientists into a hero who chose to sacrifice herself for the friends who showed her what it means to be truly human. While the battle rages at the middle school, Joyce and Hopper navigate the twisted landscape of the Upside Down in their desperate search for Will. The Nightmare Realm reveals itself as a predatory dimension designed to consume hope itself, where every familiar landmark from Hawkins has been transformed into something hostile and wrong. Their hazmat suits provide minimal protection against an environment that attacks not just the body but the spirit. The air carries spores that seem to infect both physical and emotional well-being, while the perpetual twilight and falling ash create an atmosphere of despair that weighs on the soul like a physical burden. They follow the psychic trail that 11 established during her connection with Will, navigating impossible geography where streets become canyons of decay and houses stand as monuments to corruption. The very ground beneath their feet pulses with malevolent life, as if the dimension itself is aware of their presence and seeks to trap them in its web of despair. The search tests their resolve as the dying dimension seems to fight their every step. Reality becomes unstable around them, with passages shifting when they're not looking, and walls bleeding the black ether that serves as the Upside Down's equivalent of blood. Only their desperate determination to save an innocent child gives them the strength to continue through landscape that would drive lesser souls to madness. They find Will in the nightmare version of the public library, unconscious and barely breathing, with a strange tube extending from his mouth to his throat. The sight of the boy, pale, still connected to some kind of otherworldly life support system, reveals the true horror of what the Upside Down does to its victims. It doesn't simply kill them, it slowly consumes their life force while keeping them alive for its own purposes. The rescue becomes a race against time as Will's vital signs fade with each passing moment. Joyce's maternal instincts guide her through the delicate process of disconnecting him from the alien apparatus that has kept him alive, while Hopper uses his law enforcement training to navigate the hostile environment and plan their escape route.
Their journey back to the normal world requires them to carry an unconscious child through a dimension that actively opposes their present. The emotional weight of their mission, saving a boy who represents hope for the future, gives them strength to overcome obstacles that would normally prove insurmountable.
The victory over the Demogorgon comes at tremendous cost, leaving the heroes forever changed by their encounter with forces beyond normal human understanding. Will's rescue marks the end of his ordeal in the Upside Down, but not the end of his connection to that nightmare realm. The boy they bring back carries within him traces of the dimension's corruption seeds that will continue to grow and develop in ways that even his rescuers cannot imagine. The boys must learn to live with the absence of Eleven, whose sacrifice saved their friend but left an irreplaceable hole in their group. Mike's grief over losing someone who became so important to him so quickly reveals the depth of connections that can form even in the briefest of friendship. Lucas and Dustin struggle with their own guilt over failing to protect someone who had already suffered so much at the hands of adults who should have cared for her. Joyce's reunion with Will represents the fulfillment of every parent's most desperate hope, but it also carries the knowledge that her son has been fundamentally changed by his experience. The trauma of the Upside Down has left marks that may never fully heal, and she must learn to love and support a child who has seen horrors that no young person should endure. Nancy's survival of her encounter with the Demogorgon leaves her with a new understanding of her own strength and capabilities, but also with the permanent knowledge that the world contains dangers that exist beyond normal human comprehension. Her friendship with Jonathan, forged in the crucible of shared trauma and desperate purpose, becomes a foundation for healing and growth. The town of Hawkins returns to a semblance of normalcy, but it is a different kind of normal, one where the adults carry new secrets and the children have learned that reality is far more fragile than they ever imagined. The government cover-up ensures that the official story bears no resemblance to the truth, but those who lived through the real events understand that some experiences change you forever. The cost of their victory extends beyond the individuals directly involved to encompass the entire community. Hawkins has been saved, but its residents now carry the knowledge that their quiet town sits at the intersection of forces beyond normal comprehension. The portal between worlds has been closed, but questions remain about other creatures that might exist in the spaces between dimensions. In the end, the story of Stranger Things Season 1 becomes a testament to the power of ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things when motivated by love, friendship, and the determination to protect what matters most. The heroes of Hawkins prove that courage is not the absence of fear but the willingness to act despite that fear when the stakes are high enough and the cause is just. Their victory reminds us that even in the darkest of circumstances, when faced with forces that seem too powerful to overcome, the human spirit possesses reserves of strength and determination that can triumph over impossible odds. Sometimes the greatest heroes are those who never intended to be heroes at all but who rise to meet challenges that test the very limits of what it means to be human. In the heartland of America, nestled among rolling hills and amber fields, lies the small town of Hawkins, Indiana. It's a place where children ride their bicycles down tree-lined streets as the sun sets, where the local diner serves cherry pie and black coffee to night shift workers, and where secrets sleep beneath the surface like stones at the bottom of a still pond. On a crisp November evening in 1983, the warm glow of basement lights illuminated a sacred ritual of childhood friendship. 4 12-year-old boys, Mike Wheeler, Will Byers, Dustin Henderson, and Lucas Sinclair, gathered around a table scattered with dice, character sheets, and the infinite possibilities of their imagination. They were deep in a campaign of Dungeons and Dragons, their voices hushed with concentration as they faced the dreaded Demogorgon, a creature of shadow and terror that existed only in their game, or so they believed. Will Byers, gentle and artistic, with eyes that saw magic in the ordinary world, was the group's cleric. His soft voice trembled slightly as he rolled the dice that would determine his character's fate. The numbers seemed to dance in the basement's warm light before settling into an unlucky configuration. The Demogorgon had won this round, but it was only a game after all. With gentle laughter and promises to continue their adventure the next day, the boys packed up their treasures and prepared to return to their separate homes. As Will pedaled his bicycle through the quiet streets of Hawkins, the streetlights casting long, peaceful shadows across the pavement. He hummed softly to himself. The Clash played through his headphones, a gentle rebellion against the suburban silence. The night air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of winter's approach. Behind him, the lights of his friends' houses grew distant, and ahead, the road stretched toward home and the warmth of his mother's love. But sometimes, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, the world shifts. Sometimes, the shadows grow deeper than they should, and the line between imagination and reality blurs like watercolors in the rain. Joyce Byers woke the next morning to silence, not the comfortable quiet of a sleeping house, but the hollow absence that speaks of something missing. Will's bed was empty, his bicycle found abandoned on the side of the road like a discarded toy. In that moment, a mother's worst nightmare began to unfold with the slow, inevitable progression of storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Joyce, with her wild hair and fierce heart, felt the world tilt beneath her feet. She called out Will's name through every room of their small house, her voice growing more desperate with each echo that returned empty. The police were kind but measured in their response. Boys sometimes ran away, they said gently. Sometimes they got scared and hid. But Joyce knew her son like she knew the rhythm of her own breathing. Will wouldn't run. Will wouldn't hide. Something had taken her boy. At Hawkins Middle School, the absence echoed through different halls. Mike, Lucas, and Dustin sat in classes, where Will's empty desk seemed to pulse with wrongness. Their teachers spoke in hushed tones. Their classmates whispered theories. But the three boys knew that conventional explanations could never account for the hollow feeling in their chest. That afternoon, they gathered in the school's AV room, their usual meeting place, where the gentle hum of electronic equipment provided comfort against the growing storm of worry. "We have to find him," Mike declared, his young voice carrying a determination that surprised even himself. The others nodded, their friendship forming an unbreakable chain of loyalty and love. They would search where adults wouldn't think to look. They would use their knowledge of the town's secret places, the forgotten corners where boys like them built forts and shared dreams. But as they prepared to venture into the darkening woods around Hawkins, none of them could have imagined that search would lead them not just through the familiar landscapes of their childhood, but into realms that existed beyond the boundaries of their small, safe world.
In the cold, sterile corridors of Hawkins National Laboratory, a different kind of childhood was ending. 11. A girl with no real name, only a number tattooed on her wrist, like a cruel brand, sat in a room as white and empty as a blank page. Her head was shaven, her eyes held depths that no child should carry, and in her small hands rested power that could crack the very foundations of reality. Martin Brenner, who insisted she call him Papa though he was nothing like a father, watched her through observation windows with the cold interest of a scientist studying a particularly fascinating specimen. He spoke to her in gentle tones that masked the steel beneath, coaxing her to use her abilities, to reach into the darkness between worlds, and pull forth secrets that should have remained hidden. But on this night, something went wrong. Or perhaps from Eleven's perspective, something finally went right. During one of Brenner's experiments, as she was forced to spy on a Russian agent through the psychic realm they called the Upside Down, she accidentally tore open a doorway, a wound in the fabric of reality itself. And through that wound, something hungry and ancient caught the scent of our world. In the chaos that followed, as alarms wailed like wounded animals and men in white coats ran through corridors with the panic of those who have lost control of forces beyond their understanding, 11 escaped. She ran through the rain-soaked streets of Hawkins in a hospital gown, her bare feet splashing through puddles that reflected the neon lights of a world she had never been allowed to experience. She found shelter in Benny's Burgers, a small diner where the owner, Benny Hammond, had a heart too big for his own good. He looked at this strange, silent girl and saw not a weapon or an experiment, but a child in need of kindness. He made her a meal, spoke to her gently, and for a brief moment, 11 glimpsed what normal human connection might feel like. But the laboratory's reach was long,
and kindness, it seemed, was a luxury the adult world could rarely afford. Benny's compassion cost him his life, and 11 was once again running through the night, alone and afraid, carrying secrets that could reshape the world. It was in the middle school gymnasium, during their desperate search for Will, that Mike, Lucas, and Dustin first encountered the girl who would change everything. She appeared like a ghost in the rain, huddled and shaking, her enormous eyes reflecting a fear so deep it seemed to echo from another dimension entirely. Most children would have run. Most adults would have called the authority. But Mike Wheeler, with the instinctive kindness that made him a natural leader among his friends, saw past the strangeness to the scared child beneath. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice gentle in the way that children can be gentle, without pretense or agenda. They brought her to Mike's basement, that sacred space where their friendship had been forged through countless hours of shared imagination. Nancy Wheeler, Mike's teenage sister, was upstairs preparing for a party at Steve Harrington's house, her mind occupied with the complex social mathematics of high school popularity. Their parents were away, leaving the house wrapped in the comfortable quiet of suburban evening. In the basement's warm light, 11 slowly began to reveal fragments of her story. She couldn't or wouldn't speak much, but she showed them a photograph of Will that she somehow recognized. She knew things she shouldn't know, could do things that defied explanation. When she made Mike's Dungeons & Dragons figurine disappear with nothing more than a focused stare, the boys realized that their game had somehow leaked into reality. Lucas was suspicious, his practical nature rebelling against the impossibility of what he was witnessing. Dustin was fascinated, his scientific mind racing to understand the mechanics of what seemed like magic. But Mike felt something deeper, a recognition that this strange, powerful girl was as lost and afraid as they were, just in a different way. They called her 11, the number they glimpsed on her wrist, but Mike began to think of her as L, a real name for a real person, not a laboratory designation. And perhaps for the first time in her short, strange life, 11 began to understand what it meant to belong somewhere, to be part of something larger than herself. While the boys were learning to trust their mysterious new friend, other threads of the larger tapestry were beginning to weave together. Nancy Wheeler, beautiful and popular but harboring her own quiet depths, found herself drawn into the mystery from another angle entirely. Her best friend Barb Holland, loyal and sensible, had accompanied her to Steve Harrington's party with visible reluctance. Barb represented the childhood Nancy was leaving behind, while Steve represented the glittering, dangerous territory of teenage romance and adult complication. The party unfolded with the typical rhythm of suburban adolescence: music, alcohol, the awkward dance of attraction and peer pressure. But that night, as Nancy disappeared upstairs with Steve, Barb sat alone by the swimming pool, her finger bleeding from a small cut, the drops falling into the chlorinated water like tiny signals sent into an alien sea. She waited faithfully for her friend, unaware that the darkness around the edges of the party was deeper than it appeared, that something was watching from a realm where shadows had substance and hunger. The next morning, Barb was gone, her car abandoned in the Harrington driveway like a question mark punctuating the night's events. Nancy woke to find her best friend vanished, leaving behind only guilt and the terrible recognition that the world was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Meanwhile, Joyce Byers was experiencing her own descent into what others believed was madness. The lights in her house began to flicker and pulse with patterns that felt almost like communication. When she was alone, she could hear Will's voice calling to her from somewhere impossibly distant, somewhere that seemed to exist in the spaces between seconds. The walls of her home began to breathe. Letters of the alphabet appeared on the wallpaper as if burned there by an invisible hand. And through it all, Joyce held on to her love for her son like a lifeline, refusing to accept that he was simply gone, refusing to let the world convince her that a mother's intuition was just hysteria. Chief Jim Hopper, carrying his own quiet burden of loss, a daughter taken by cancer, a marriage that couldn't survive the grief, initially dismissed Joyce's claims as the breakdown of a woman under unbearable stress. But Hopper was a good cop beneath his cynical exterior, and good cops learned to trust their instincts. Something about the boy's disappearance didn't fit the usual patterns. Something about Joyce's desperation rang with the clear note of truth.
As the investigation deepened, Hopper began to uncover connections that led him to the most unlikely place: Hawkins National Laboratory, the government facility that had sat on the edge of town for years, like a sleeping giant, its true purpose hidden behind chain-link fences and bureaucratic doublespeak. The laboratory, Hopper discovered, was conducting experiments that pushed at the boundaries of known science. Under the direction of Dr. Brenner, researchers had been exploring the potential of psychic abilities, using children as test subjects in programs that existed in the shadow spaces between legal and illegal, moral and monstrous. 11 was their greatest success and their greatest failure. Her abilities allowed her to access what they called the Upside Down, a dark reflection of our world, a place where the familiar geography of Hawkins existed in twisted, decaying form. It was a realm of perpetual twilight, where the air tasted of copper and fear, and where something ancient and hungry had been waiting for a doorway to open. The creature they would come to call the Demogorgon, named after the monster from the boys' Dungeons & Dragons game, was not evil in any human sense. It was simply hungry, operating according to instincts honed over eons in a world where survival meant consumption. When 11 accidentally opened the gateway between dimensions, she had rung a dinner bell that echoed across realities. Will Byers, riding his bicycle through the quiet streets of Hawkins, had been in the wrong place when two worlds briefly touched. The Demogorgon, following the scent of life across the dimensional barrier, had found him and dragged him back into its twilight realm. There, in a place that looked like Hawkins but felt like a nightmare, Will was hiding, surviving on courage and hope while his body slowly succumbed to the alien atmosphere. The various threads of the mystery began to converge as the characters realized they were fighting the same battle from different fronts. Nancy, searching for Barb, found herself armed with determination and Steve Harrington's surprising loyalty. Jonathan Byers, Will's older brother, put aside his careful distance from social interaction to join forces with Nancy, their shared purpose overriding the complex social hierarchies of high school. Joyce and Hopper, the adults in this strange fairy tale, combined Joyce's maternal intuition with Hopper's investigative skills and official authority. They stormed the laboratory like a small army of two, demanding answers and finding horrors that challenged their understanding of what their government was capable of. And in Mike Wheeler's basement, 11 made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She chose to use her abilities not as weapons in someone else's war, but as tools to save the people who had shown her kindness. The boys had given her something she had never experienced: unconditional acceptance, friendship, and the radical idea that she was worth protecting. When the moment came to face the Demogorgon directly, 11 didn't hesitate. The creature that had haunted their nightmares, that had torn children from their beds and dragged them into darkness, faced her in the middle school gymnasium. The battle was brief but cosmic in scope. Not just a fight between two beings, but a collision between different concepts of what power should be used for. With a scream that seemed to echo across dimensions, 11 disintegrated both herself and the monster, her sacrifice opening a window of possibility for Will's rescue. She vanished into particles of light, leaving behind only the memory of a girl who had learned to love and chosen to protect that love at the ultimate cost. In the Upside Down, Will Byers had been fighting his own battle against despair and the alien atmosphere that was slowly poisoning his small body. Joyce and Hopper, guided by 11's sacrifice and their own desperate love, found him in the dark reflection of his own home, unconscious and barely breathing, a tube extending from his throat to his lungs like some nightmarish umbilical cord. They pulled him back into our world, back to hospital rooms with white walls and beeping machines, back to the realm of medical science and human healing. For days, Will floated between consciousness and dreams, his body fighting to remember how to exist in a world of normal air and familiar light. When he finally opened his eyes, it was to see his mother's face, streaked with tears of relief and joy so profound it seemed to rewrite the very atoms of the room. Joyce held her son as if she could anchor him to this reality through the sheer force of her love, whispering his name like a prayer of gratitude to whatever powers had allowed this miracle. The reunion extended to his friends,
who gathered around his hospital bed with careful smiles and the particular tenderness that children show when they realize how fragile their world actually is. Mike, Lucas, and Dustin had aged years in the span of days, their innocence scarred but their friendship forged into something unbreakable by the crucible of their shared experience. Will recovered slowly, his body healing from the alien infection while his spirit gradually remembered how to inhabit a world of sunshine and laughter. The doctors spoke of trauma and recovery time, but his friends provided the real medicine: continuation, normalcy, the promise that some things remained unchanged despite everything that had happened. A month later, the boys returned to Mike's basement for another session of Dungeons and Dragons. The dice rolled across the familiar table. The figurines stood in their accustomed places, and their voices rose and fell in the eternal rhythm of shared storytelling. But something had changed in the quality of their play, a depth that comes from knowing that monsters are real and friendship is the most powerful magic of all. Will seemed fully recovered, his gentle laugh unchanged, his artistic eye still finding wonder in the ordinary details of their small town. Yet sometimes, late at night when he was alone, he would cough and find something dark and alien in his palm. Sometimes when the lights flickered, he could see the upside down overlapping with our world like a double-exposed photograph. These moments were brief, almost dreamlike, and Will kept them to himself. He had been through enough darkness. He wanted to live in the light of his returned life, to savor the gift of ordinary days and familiar friendships. The upside down had left its mark on him, but it had not broken him. If anything, his experience had taught him to treasure the simple miracle of being alive, of being home, of being loved. Nancy Wheeler found herself changed as well. Her priorities shifted by the loss of Barb and the realization that popularity and social status meant nothing when faced with real danger. She treated Steve Harrington with a new kind of respect, recognizing the courage he had shown when it mattered most, but she also maintained a distance that spoke of deeper preoccupation. Joyce Byers, her son, returned to her, threw herself into the fierce joy of ordinary motherhood with renewed intensity. Every meal she cooked for Will, every load of his laundry she folded, every goodnight kiss she gave him, was an act of defiance against the forces that had tried to steal him away. Her love had literally brought him back from another dimension. She would not take a single moment of his presence for granted. Chief Hopper, his faith in human decency somewhat restored by the successful rescue, returned to his duties with a new sense of purpose. He had seen what lay beneath the surface of his quiet town, and he would be watching, ready to protect his community from threats both mundane and supernatural.
The strongest theme to emerge from that autumn of 1983 was the power of friendship to transcend every boundary. Social, dimensional, and even the barrier between life and death. Mike, Lucas, Dustin, and Will had proven that loyalty could overcome fear, that love could conquer the most alien of evils. Their friendship had been tested in ways that most adults never experience, and it had emerged not just intact but strengthened. They had learned that the bonds between them were not just emotional conveniences but actual forces in the world, capable of inspiring heroism and making possible the impossible. Eleven's sacrifice had been motivated not by duty or revenge but by her love for the boys who had welcomed her into their circle without question or condition. In the short time she had known them, she had experienced more genuine affection than in all her previous years of existence. That love had given her something worth dying for, and paradoxically, something worth living for. Even though she had vanished, the boys refused to believe she was truly gone. Mike, in particular, held on to the faith that someone who had taught them so much about courage and sacrifice wouldn't simply disappear from their lives forever. Love, he had learned, was a force that operated according to its own physics, independent of the usual rules of time and space. The courage the children had shown was not the reckless bravery of action heroes, but the quiet determination of ordinary people who choose to do what's right despite their fear. They had been terrified throughout their ordeal, but they had acted anyway, guided by their love for each other and their refusal to abandon hope. This courage had infected the adults around them as well. Joyce had found the strength to fight government agents and interdimensional monsters because her love for Will demanded nothing less. Hopper had rediscovered his sense of purpose by witnessing the boys' unwavering loyalty to their missing friend. Nancy had learned that real bravery meant protecting the people you care about, even when the cost is everything you thought you wanted. As winter settled over Hawkins, the town returned to its surface normalcy, but beneath that placid exterior, everyone touched by the events carried forward a new understanding of the world's hidden depths. The boys resumed their regular routines: school, homework, bike rides, through familiar neighborhoods. But now they approached these ordinary activities with the knowledge that the extraordinary was always just a heartbeat away. The basement of the Wheeler house remained their sanctuary, but it was now also a memorial to 11 and a reminder that some friendships transcend the physical world. They kept her memory alive through stories and small rituals, maintaining space for her in their circle even though her chair remained empty. Will's return had restored the natural order of their group, but it had also added layers of depth to their relationship. They were more careful with each other now, more aware of how precious and fragile their connection was. They had learned that love was not just an emotion but an action, something that required constant tending and fierce protection. The mystery of what exactly had happened to them would remain largely unspoken in the broader community. Official explanations were offered and accepted, cover stories that allowed the town to heal without having to confront the more disturbing truths about the laboratory and its work. But those who had lived through the real events carried the knowledge like a secret flame, a light that illuminated their understanding of what was truly important in life. Joyce decorated their small house for Christmas with extra care that year, every ornament and strand of lights a celebration of Will's presence. Hopper visited more often, having appointed himself an unofficial guardian of the Byers family. Nancy gave Jonathan a Christmas present, a new camera to replace the one that had been broken during their battle with the Demogorgon, and with it an understanding that their shared experience had created a bond that transcended their previous social boundaries. And as the snow falls gently on the quiet streets of Hawkins, as warm light glows from windows where families gather for evening meals and homework sessions, as the ordinary magic of small-town life continues its eternal rhythm, we can rest in the knowledge that some stories end not with grand resolutions, but with the simple triumph of love over fear, friendship over isolation, courage over despair. The boys are safe in Mike's basement, their laughter mixing with the gentle hum of the space heater and the distant sound of Mrs. Wheeler calling them up for dinner. Will is home, surrounded by people who love him, his gentle spirit intact despite everything he has endured. Joyce sleeps more peacefully now, her maternal vigilance softened but not abandoned. Hopper makes his rounds through the quiet streets, a guardian watching over a community that doesn't know how much it needs protecting. In this moment, all is well in Hawkins, Indiana. The monsters have been defeated, the lost have been found, and the bonds of love and friendship have proven stronger than the forces that would tear them apart. The streetlights cast their gentle glow on empty sidewalks where children's bicycles rest against porch railings, waiting for tomorrow's adventures. The night air carries the scent of chimney smoke, and the distant sound of television shows playing in living rooms where families gather. This is the true magic of Hawkins, not the supernatural forces that occasionally break through from other dimensions, but the everyday miracle of ordinary people choosing love over fear, hope over despair, connection over isolation. It's the magic of Joyce Byers' fierce maternal love, of 4 boys who would rather face monsters than abandon a friend, of a girl who discovered her humanity just in time to sacrifice it for others. As you drift off to sleep, let the gentle sounds of this small town carry you into peaceful dreams. Let the memory of courage and friendship warm you like a soft blanket. Let the knowledge that love can conquer even the darkest forces soothe your spirit as you surrender to the restorative power of rest. In Hawkins, the night is quiet and safe. The boys are home, their friendship a bright light against any darkness that might threaten. And somewhere, in the spaces between dreams and waking,
Perhaps a girl with extraordinary abilities watches over them still, her love transcending even the boundaries between worlds. Sleep now, gentle dreamer. The story is complete, the circle is unbroken, and all is well in the small town where extraordinary things happen to ordinary people who have the courage to love each other against all odds. The end. And the beginning of peaceful dream.